In my tabletop role-playing game, Tales from Elsewhere, player characters are built using backstory elements, these packets of narrative and mechanical benefit that they piece together in a free-form way. And it was actually quite a task building out all 50 backstory elements for the game. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and at the time of this recording, our game has just finished crowdfunding on Kickstarter, and we've gotten at least one stretch goal by now. We'll have a link down below to that campaign because we're actually accepting late pledges on certain items for the next few months at the time of this video's release, so maybe consider checking that out. In today's lecture, I'm going to show you my actual design process for building these out. I had a very methodical way that I approached this problem of building out all 50 of these and keeping that process organized. And we have another video on this YouTube channel that I'll link down below that is the tutorial for character creation. You don't need to watch that before watching this one, but if you find this video interesting, consider checking out that other one for a big old breakdown of actually making a character in my rule system. All right, enough preamble. Let's hop into Excalidraw and Google Sheets and really dig into design process today. Now, in order to show you my process, I first need to give you a rundown on what pieces compose a player character in a Tales from Elsewhere game and how backstory elements allow you to make that character. So really, all characters in a TFE game are the same numerically. They all are within the same bounds. They start with the same number of features, the same number of skills, and the same number of knowledges and so forth. It's just about getting access to different types within those categories. And the way this looks is every player character, which we'd call a survivor, has 1 master skill, 2 adept skills, 4 novice skills, and 4 layman skills. They have 3 edges, 1 expert knowledge, 2 familiar knowledges, some role-playing traits, and some gear. And they'll all have this. Every single one, no matter what choices you make, all exist within these bounds. It means that balance-wise, it keeps characters very in line with one another. Sure, one character might be a master with with their 6-shooter and therefore really deadly, while another person might be a master of guile and they're very sneaky and can lie well. You're still creating specialization, but no one becomes this extreme outlier. And now, in theory, in a vacuum, without any setting around this, you could just choose all of these options from the lists in the book, not actually tie yourself to anything in particular. But that's not the way a TFE game is structured. You're meant to pick backstory elements that funnel you into certain categories and giving you access to certain skills to pick from. And you choose a profession, a culture, and an inciting incident. And now, this isn't a class and species and background or something like that, right? These are just backstory pieces. None of them really confine you in any way, more so than others. It's not like if you pick lawman as your profession, you must be a gunslinger. It's simply giving you access to certain skills and edges and knowledges that would be relevant to being a lawman. But it's up to you to pick them after you've aggregated all of the options. These result in this totality. So once you've picked your culture and your profession and your incident and pieced this all together, you'll have all of these options to pick from that you then lock in. And I can show you briefly what a single backstory element looks like because we've had mock-ups made for the Kickstarter campaign. These are already all built out in text, sure, but now we can show you something a little cooler looking. A single backstory element contains a story and narrative around it. It has equipment you get to pick from for that backstory element, and then which skills, edges, traits, and knowledges they give you access to. It's all contained on a single page and with some flashy art. And there's 50 of these to mix and match between. For example, if my profession was lawman, that gives me access to the bravado and range skill. If my culture was the Wazte tribe, that might give me access to dexterity and melee, and my incident could give me access to guile or acuity. And the aggregate of all of those skill accesses is what I get to pick my Master and Adept skills from. So I take a look at all of the options available to me from all 3 of my backstory elements, and then lock in which ones I want to focus on. Your Novice skills are picked from any skills on the list. You don't need to actually have a backstory skill relevant to those. But your Adept and Master skills are drawn from backstory skills alone. And it's these skill combinations that were so vital in the planning of my backstory elements. With 50 backstory elements, each giving access to 2 skills, I didn't want any duplicate pairs. And that's a lot to keep in your head. And so what I ended up using is an adjacency chart, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here we have an empty adjacency chart. There are 11 skills in Tales from Elsewhere, 4 for body, 4 for mind, and 3 for fighting. So I put them all in this adjacency chart, which shows their concurrence, where they line up. And this little calculator helped me plan out which backstory elements are going to fall where. What this ended up looking like when I was done was like this, where I used color coding to help visually show where certain types of backstory elements were falling. I used blue for professions, I used yellow for cultures, and red for inciting incidents. Now, I didn't necessarily need certain skills to be purely symmetrical throughout the system. It wasn't a design goal to have perfect symmetry and perfect even distribution, nor was it a design goal to fill every single square on the chart. There would be 55 total backstory elements in that case, and I decided that 50 seemed plenty for this project and a sufficient number to go for, as it is a lot to plan out in the end. The way I went about doing this was to think about the narrative combinations that these skills would represent. Where 2 of them line up on the chart is a single backstory element. And you'll notice that some of these are grayed out. That's because we don't have a backstory element that would give access to the same skill twice. That wouldn't do anything within the rules. Ranged plus ranged doesn't mean anything. You can have ranged as a backstory element or not. It's a binary. But what I did is I'd look for how these different combinations could have meaning within the setting. The first Tales from Elsewhere book is a post-apocalyptic Weird West, and so I needed to think through those tropes. And this sort of thinking originated with actually Magic the Gathering's Ravnica setting, which asked interesting questions about different permutations of mana colors, what these different ideologies would represent. So for example, when looking at this row, the ranged skill, which is how you'd shoot guns in a setting like this, right? It's how you'd know how to fire a bow or use your 6-shooter or shotgun. And so it made me think, okay, who would have access to that sort of training in their backstory? For example, what is discipline and ranged? So somebody who'd be trained in firearms and be highly disciplined. Well, turns out that sounds like a militia profession, right? They have that regimented lifestyle. While ranged and guile sounds more like an outlaw to me, right? Maybe ranged and bravado being leadership and intimidation, sounds kind of like a lawman. And you can see how this starts to build out a fiction while also creating the necessary permutations without duplicates for the entire setting. Coming up with all 50 of these permutations was a very interesting and enjoyable writing challenge, because I needed to tie these to some sort of backstory, some people or profession or thing that would happen to you in the Clockworld setting. So for example, looking at some of the combinations started me thinking like athletics and ranged, what would that be? And turns out that's a perfect fit for the Chesapeake tribe within the setting, which are inspired by the various plains tribes of North America. Or looking at brawling and bravado, I thought, oh, that's perfect for a pugilist, right? A bare-knuckle boxer with a big mustache, right? So these combinations started to reveal themselves to me, and it was a very engaging challenge to come up with all of them and try to keep the distributions as easy and even as possible. And now what this chart ends up becoming is a template I can provide to other designers who are interested in building a TFE setting, because we will be releasing an OGL and SRD all for free on our website that will give people the building blocks to make their own world that functions like a TFE game, using the rules and structures that would make it compatible with any other TFE product. Because all the books we're going to be releasing and all the settings, they'll all use this same building structure to build out their backstory elements. And if anybody who makes their own setting uses that same structure, you can easily mix and match them, creating hybrid settings and allowing that whole library of games and worlds to be not exclusive with one another. They're all built using the same building blocks. And so we're really excited to provide these tools to the community. There's going to be several templates we release. A template for how to build your own backstory element, that page layout. This template for how to plan out your backstory elements. A template for how to build your own threats that's basically already going to be in the handbook itself. Just really arming people with the tools they would need to make something fully compatible with any of our official TFE products. And that's because I'm a firm believer in the power of community within the tabletop role-playing game space. I think these games are all the better the more open and hackable and shareable they are. And sure, we want to be able to turn some sort of profit to pay for all the artwork in our books, but that's not going to be by restricting other designers' abilities to write adventures or add new backstory elements or edges or equipment that works within this ecosystem. We're taking a page from games like Shadowdark and Morkborg, right, that have these open, very permissive licenses that you really don't need to worry about. You just have to put your little disclaimer in the book, and you can stamp it with, compatible with Tales from Elsewhere and so forth, and you're ready to go. And you can then sell that product without having to give us a cut. And we'll be releasing the OGL and the SRD and these templates end of 2025, very start of 2026. We just want to make sure they're all good to go. We run them by a lawyer and all that before we hand them out. So we're going to be providing these tools to the community while the Clockworld rulebook is being finalized for printing. That way, any designers who would like to make adventures or content that would be launched with the actual delivery of our final product, they can have something ready to go by taking several months to build something. We just really want to arm you, the community members, who may be interested in building things with this rule system with all the support you could need. Well, I hope you found that interesting. And if you did, let me know in the comments, because if these sort of deep dives into my own specific design process for making my game is useful to you, the community member, the indie tabletop designer, then let me know, because I'm happy to make more of these sort of in the weeds examinations of my process. All right, well, thank you for watching. And as a reminder, Kickstarter link down below for late pledges if you're around the time of this video launching, and hope to see you here next week on Tales from Elsewhere.